Okay, picking back up with question 13. So there were some major principles of government that were stated in the Declaration. Some of these include the idea that all men are created equal. People have natural rights. They referred to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in this document. The idea that government exists to protect natural rights. And when government starts to deny or take away these rights, the government should be changed or abolished. Who was the key author of the Declaration? That was Thomas Jefferson. And as far as John Locke's influence on this author, mainly the idea of natural rights. Again, Locke called them life, liberty, and property, and Jefferson kind of changed them to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the Declaration. Question 14, what did Thomas Paine do and why was it so important in 1776? Thomas Paine wrote the pamphlet Common Sense, and the idea of this pamphlet was to convince the colonists to declare independence from England. During the Revolutionary War, what did France do and why? This is question 15. France provided support to the colonists through training and through the use of their navy because the French were rivals with Great Britain. And eventually, the French support kind of helps turn the tide of the war and secure the victory for the colonists against the British. Question 16, list 5 features of the Articles of Confederation and explain how these features were problematic. So one feature was there was no chief executive or no president. This led to there being no national leadership. Under the Articles, the government had no ability to tax, which led to no money to be able to run the government. There was no national currency, which meant that every state had their own money, very inefficient from an economic perspective. There was no standing army, which left the new nation very vulnerable to attack. And finally, it took 13 out of 13 of the new states to change the Articles, which made change very, very difficult to make. Question 17, what were some successes of the Articles of Confederation? So under the Articles, the Americans won and ended the Revolutionary War. They negotiated the treaty with Paris and also passed the Northwest Ordinance, which was the process for admitting new states to the country. Question 18, Shays Rebellion in 1786. This was a rebellion of farmers in Massachusetts who were in a lot of debt. They took over several banks and shut down some courthouses. The government under the Articles was powerless to stop it, and a private army had to be raised to put it down. So the impact of Shays Rebellion basically shows the weakness of the Articles and demonstrated the need for a more powerful government and a standing army. After Shays Rebellion, question 19, the goal of the original Philadelphia Convention in 1787 was to amend or to change the Articles. What they ended up doing, though, was scrapping the Articles entirely and writing the Constitution. So when the Constitution was written, there were several compromises that had to be made. One of them was what we call the Great Compromise. This is question 20. Under the Great Compromise, this was about representation. So this led to the creation of a bicameral or two-house legislature. We have the House of Representatives. Representation in the House is based off of population. This pleased the big states. Representation in the Senate is based off equality, 2 per each state, and this pleased the small states. Question B, the 3/5 compromise. This was about slavery. So the deal here was that 3/5 of the enslaved population in each state would be counted for both representation in Congress and for taxation. Question C, this was the Commerce Compromise. So the deal here was that Congress or the federal government would be the one to regulate trade, but also they cannot limit the slave trade for 20 years. And finally, question D, the Presidential Compromise. There would be a president, a chief executive, but that would be picked by the Electoral College, not directly by the people. So, question 21, there were 2 different sides or 2 different opinions regarding the ratification of the Constitution. The Federalists were the ones that wanted it ratified. The Federalists thought that we needed a stronger federal government. We needed to unify the states under the Constitution, that a stronger government could protect our country and also protect rights, and that checks and balances would limit this power of the government. The Anti-Federalists at first did not want the Constitution ratified. They were afraid of a strong central government overtaking the power of the states. They wanted individual rights protected and wanted states to have more power. Question 22, what were the Federalist Papers and why were they important? So the Federalist Papers were essays written by Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison, and these essays supported ratification of the Constitution. Finally, question 23, when Virginia and New York were discussing ratification of the Constitution, they strongly felt that the Bill of Rights, protection of individual rights and individual liberties, was missing from the Constitution. The Bill of Rights was eventually added shortly after ratification. We'll pick back up with 24 in the next video.